He was the $6 million man, unstoppable, admired, living the dream. She was the most iconic woman on television, her smile bright enough to light up any room. Together, they looked like the perfect Hollywood power couple. But behind the glossy magazine covers, the truth was nothing like the fantasy. What unfolded between Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett was a slow spiral into heartbreak, betrayal, and a silence that would last for decades. Lee Majors would never forgive her. And once you hear what really happened, you'll understand why. Long before their names were etched into American pop culture, they were just two bright-eyed actors fighting to be noticed in a business that could be as cruel as it was glamorous. Lee, born Harvey Lee Yeary in Michigan, raised in Kentucky, had the rugged good looks and quiet confidence casting directors loved. His first big break came with The Big Valley, starring alongside Barbara Stanwyck, where he quickly earned a reputation as a serious actor with undeniable presence. Farrah, meanwhile, was a Southern beauty queen from Texas. With sun-kissed hair, a magnetic smile, and an effortless charm, she moved to Los Angeles chasing a modeling career. Cameras loved her. Agents noticed her. Her look, glamorous yet approachable, was already iconic before America even knew her name. They met in the late 1960s, introduced at a party by mutual friends. Witnesses say the chemistry was instant. Lee was already a TV star. Farrah was just getting her start. But it wasn't just a superficial attraction. Lee was quiet, grounded, and fiercely loyal. Farrah was vibrant, funny, and full of life. He steadied her. She inspired him. It felt meant to be. In 1973, they married. For a while, it really did look like a Hollywood dream. Lee had just landed the role of a lifetime, Colonel Steve Austin in The $6 Million Man. The show was a cultural phenomenon. His face ended up on action figures, lunchboxes, and posters across America. Farrah's career was rising too. She was landing commercials, gracing magazine covers, and earning small acting roles. Lee proudly called her the love of my life in interviews, praising her beauty and talent. From the outside, they were golden. Red carpets, celebrity parties, perfect smiles. But behind closed doors, cracks were forming. Their schedules rarely aligned. Lee was working grueling hours on set. Farrah was constantly networking, auditioning, and chasing opportunities. The fame they had both worked so hard to achieve was slowly pulling them apart. Lee held on. He believed in their marriage. But fame changes people. Not always for the worse, just in ways that can make them unrecognizable to the one who knows them best. And when Farrah's big break arrived, the pressures on their marriage would go from difficult to unbearable. Farrah Fawcett didn't just rise to fame, she exploded into it. In 1976, she joined Charlie's Angels, and overnight, everything changed. The show was an instant hit, but Farrah became more than a TV actress. She became the face of the era. The red one-piece swimsuit poster, with her windblown hair and dazzling smile, sold over 12 million copies. It became one of the most famous images of the 20th century. Suddenly, Farrah was everywhere. Talk shows, magazine covers, billboards. She was inescapable. For millions, it was a dream come true. For Lee, it was the beginning of the end. The whirlwind of Farrah's fame consumed her life. Producers were offering her new roles. Brands wanted her endorsement. Stylists and publicists kept her schedule packed. Lee, a star in his own right, suddenly felt like a bystander in his own marriage. The sweet, grounded Texas girl he'd fallen for seemed to be disappearing, replaced by a woman constantly in demand, constantly on display. According to multiple sources, Lee once asked her producers to shift her filming schedule so they could at least have dinner together a few nights a week. It wasn't much, just a husband wanting time with his wife. Farrah reportedly refused. She didn't want to appear as though she was bending her career for him. Her independence, admirable in many ways, only widened the emotional gap. Lee later admitted that during the height of her fame, he sometimes saw Farrah only 2 days a week. And even then, those moments weren't always quality time, just slivers of what used to be a deep connection, reduced to calendar slots. What hurt Lee the most wasn't the fame itself, but what it represented. Fame meant a shift in priorities, in values, in intimacy. The woman who once leaned on him for support now stood alone on a pedestal, carrying the weight of her own empire. Somewhere along the way, they stopped speaking the same emotional language. Lee believed in traditional marriage, in staying together no matter what. Farrah was rewriting her identity in real time, in front of millions, with no intention of slowing down. She wasn't trying to hurt him, but success often has collateral damage, and their marriage was becoming one of its first casualties. And then, just when things seemed like they couldn't get worse, something happened. Something that would shatter whatever was left of their bond, and it would play out in front of the entire world. By the late 1970s, the gap between Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett had grown into a chasm. The love that once seemed unshakable was now buried under fame, relentless schedules, and months spent apart. On paper, they were still married. In reality, they were two stars orbiting different worlds. Farrah's days were packed. TV shoots, photo shoots, branding deals, red carpets. Lee was still carrying the weight of the $6 million man, grinding through long hours while watching the pieces of his marriage quietly slip away. He tried, again and again, dinner plans, small gestures, even asking mutual friends to help them reconnect. But by then, Farrah, whether she realized it or not, was already pulling away. And then came the blow that would shatter what little was left. It came in the form of another man, and not just any man. Ryan ONeal. This wasn't a stranger. He was a fellow actor, a peer, and once a friend. Lee had trusted him, welcomed him. So when tabloid covers began splashing photos of Ryan and Farrah, holding hands, laughing, attending events together, the sting was instant and personal. The affair wasn't whispered about in back rooms. It was everywhere. Glossy magazines, late-night punchlines, endless speculation. To the public, it was just another Hollywood scandal. To Lee, it was a betrayal that cut deeper than any headline could capture. Friends say he was blindsided. There was no warning, no private conversation to prepare him. He found out with the rest of the world, staring at photographs of his wife in the arms of a man he knew. Some in the industry still whisper about the timeline, that the romance between Farrah and Ryan might have started while she and Lee were still trying to patch things up. No one can say for certain, but one thing was undeniable. The trust was gone. Farrah didn't hide it. She and Ryan appeared together everywhere, and the press quickly crowned them Hollywood's newest golden couple. But under all the smiles was an unspoken truth. Something sacred had been broken to get there. Lee never fired back. No public outbursts, no tell-all interviews, no naming names. Just silence. And that silence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. He withdrew, stopped showing up to events with her, stopped answering personal questions in interviews, and eventually stopped talking about her entirely. By the time the divorce was finalized in 1982, nearly 9 years after their wedding, Lee had already closed that chapter of his life. Farrah stayed in the spotlight. Her relationship with Ryan ONeal played out like a soap opera in real life. Breakups, reconciliations, public fights, private makeups, all feeding the tabloids. Lee, on the other hand, vanished from her narrative. When Charlie's Angels reunions happened, he wasn't there. When she walked red carpets, he was nowhere in sight. It didn't seem like bitterness. It seemed like self-preservation. A man protecting himself from a wound that had never fully healed. In one rare moment, when an interviewer dared to bring up Charlie's Angels, Lee admitted he never watched it when it aired. "It was just too painful," he said softly, watching her shine on screen, knowing what they'd lost. It was more than he could take, and perhaps the most telling detail of all. Lee never tried to set the record straight. He never blamed her, never attacked Ryan. Instead, he chose the only form of control left to him. He removed himself from her world completely. Friends say he dated over the years, but no one ever filled the space Farrah had occupied. For nearly 20 years, he stayed unmarried, pouring himself into work, keeping his personal life locked away. He was still charming, still kind, but there was a guardedness about him now, a quiet wall that hadn't been there before. And behind that wall, the wound never really closed. Farrah Fawcett was still Farrah, bold, beloved, and never far from the headlines, though not always for the reasons she wanted. Her relationship with Ryan ONeal was a roller coaster, filled with ups and downs, public fights, and reconciliations. She shared her life with the world, no matter how messy. Lee Majors? He shut the door and threw away the key. Their paths seemed permanently split, but years later, something quietly unexpected almost changed the story. It was the early 2000s. Farrah had stepped back from the bright glare of fame, focusing on art, charity work, and smaller roles. Lee had mellowed too, no longer the relentless action star of the 70s, but a seasoned actor with a long career behind him. Then, through a mutual friend, a proposal was quietly made. Not a media circus, no cameras, just a simple chance to meet again, to talk, maybe laugh, and clear the silence that had stretched on for decades. At first, both seemed open to it. Farrah, softened by time, was willing to see Lee once more. Lee was hesitant, but he listened. He admitted privately that part of him missed who she had been. But then he said no, not out of anger or bitterness, simply because he couldn't go back. Too much had happened. Too much time had passed. Some wounds, especially the quiet, unspoken ones, never fully heal. His silence wasn't just dignity, it was protection. Seeing her again, even briefly, would mean reopening a chapter he'd fought hard to close. Not long after, Farrah was diagnosed with cancer. Her condition worsened fast, and any hope of reunion disappeared. Lee never visited. He never reached out publicly. To some, it seemed cold, but to others, it was heartbreak in its quietest form, a grief that never found the right words. Long before the world knew Farrah was sick, Lee had already said goodbye. Yet that door, though closed, never really locked. And what came next made that heartbreak final. In 2006, news broke that Farrah was battling a rare, aggressive cancer. She faced it with raw courage, documenting her fight in a deeply personal video diary that became a powerful documentary. Millions watched. Many cried. All admired the strength she showed against overwhelming odds. But one person stayed silent. Lee Majors. While tributes poured in and the media reflected on her legacy, Lee remained out of the spotlight. No comments, no appearances, no public gestures. It wasn't for lack of care. Friends say he followed her health updates quietly, grieving privately from a distance. There was no bitterness left, only sorrow. But Lee had made peace long ago that their chapter was closed. Reopening that door, even just to offer comfort, was something he couldn't do. Fear, guilt, self-preservation, no one knows. He stayed away. When Farrah passed in June 2009, Lee released a single, carefully measured statement. She fought a tremendous battle against a terrible disease. She was an angel on earth, and now she is an angel forever. Brief, respectful, polite, but missing the warmth that once defined their story. He did not attend her funeral. Some say he couldn't face it. Others believe he had already mourned her long before she was gone. The truth is probably somewhere in between. What's clear is that Lee Majors, the man who once would have done anything for Farrah, chose instead to remember her from afar. And in that distance, his silence spoke volumes. Many believe he carried quiet regret until the very end. Because sometimes time doesn't just rewrite stories, it seals them with silence. Today, when people think of Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett, it's often through the soft glow of nostalgia. A beautiful couple from a golden era, frozen in time on glossy magazine covers and red carpet smiles. Their photos still circulate online, tinted with vintage filters, snapshots of a love story that seemed perfect. But those who followed their journey know the truth was far more complicated. Lee Majors eventually moved on. In 2002, he married again, this time to someone far removed from the Hollywood spotlight. It was a quieter, more stable chapter, one that by all accounts brought him peace. Yet even with a new life, the shadow of Farrah never fully lifted. She was his first great love and his greatest heartbreak. Farrah, too, left behind a powerful legacy. Despite the turmoil of her personal life, she fought fiercely to be recognized as a serious actress, earning critical acclaim in dramatic roles later in her career. In her final years, she became a symbol of courage, facing illness with brutal honesty and grace. But what remained unfinished was their story. No final conversation, no public reconciliation, No moment of peace between the two who had once been everything to each other. For fans, that mystery still lingers. Did Lee ever truly forgive her? Did she ever want him to? The answer, perhaps, lives in the silence that followed her passing in the years before it. Lee never attacked her publicly, never capitalized on their story, never tried to reclaim his side of the narrative. Instead, he held on to what was left quietly, in private, where no camera could follow. Because in the end, the woman Lee Majors never forgave might also have been the woman he never stopped loving.